The morning they wheeled me into the recovery wing, I remember thinking the worst was over. I was wrong. I'd been in the hospital for 11 days by then. A construction site accident. A scaffolding collapse that took out my left knee and cracked 3 ribs on my right side. 63 years old, and I hit the ground like I was 20 and thought I could bounce. I couldn't. The surgeon told me I'd walk again, but the way he said it, measured, careful, made me understand he was leaving a lot of room in that sentence. My wife of 22 years, Donna, had visited me twice in 11 days. The nurses knew. I could tell by the way they were extra kind, the way they'd refill my water without being asked, the way they'd make small talk and linger a little longer than necessary. People working in hospitals develop a sense for loneliness. They see it on faces the way the rest of us see weather. I told myself Donna was busy. She ran a small interior design business, had clients, had deadlines. I told myself a lot of things in those 11 days, lying in a bed that smelled like antiseptic and other people's pain, watching the window go from gray morning to gray afternoon to dark. On the 12th day, she came in carrying a manila envelope. She set it on the tray table in front of me, the same tray table where the nurses left my meals. And she didn't sit down. She stood at the foot of the bed with her arms crossed and her purse hanging off her shoulder, like she was about to leave a restaurant where the food had disappointed her. "I need you to sign these," she said. I looked at the envelope. I already knew what it was. I don't know how. Maybe I'd known for longer than I was admitting to myself. "Divorce papers," I said. Not a question. "The lawyer says the sooner the better, before the insurance settlement gets complicated." There it was, before the insurance settlement. I'd been hurt on a job site. Workers' comp plus a personal injury claim against the contractor. My attorney had already told me we were looking at a significant number, and Donna had been my spouse for 22 years. Depending on how the settlement landed, and depending on how a divorce was structured, she stood to walk away with a meaningful portion of whatever I recovered. I looked at her standing there, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not rage, not grief. Something quieter than both of those. Something that'd been building for a while, I think, and had finally found its shape. "You changed the beneficiary on my life insurance," I said. She blinked. "What?" "4 months ago. You called the insurance company, told them you wanted to update the policy. The new beneficiary is your sister." Her jaw moved, but nothing came out. "I got a confirmation letter," I said. I didn't say anything because I wanted to understand what I was looking at first. Then the accident happened, and I had a lot of time lying here to think. She set her chin. "That's my right as the policyholder's spouse." "It's not, actually. Not without my signature. They made an error processing it. I've already spoken to the insurance company's compliance department. They flagged it." I paused. "Donna, how long have you been planning this?" The room was very quiet. Down the hall I could hear a cart rolling, someone laughing at a nurse's station, the ordinary sounds of a place where people were fighting to stay alive. She didn't answer my question. She pointed at the envelope. "Just sign it, Harold. Don't make this ugly." "Harold? That's me." Harold Eugene Beckett, 63 years old, lying in a hospital bed with a reconstructed knee and 3 healing ribs, being told not to make things ugly. I picked up the envelope. I opened it. I read the first page and the second, and I set it back down on the tray table. "No," I said. She stared at me. "I'm not signing anything in a hospital bed without my attorney present. That's not me being difficult. That's me being someone who's been in a bed for 12 days and can't think straight and is on pain medication and has every legal right to decline to sign documents without counsel." "Harold, you should go," I said, "and you should call your lawyer and tell him to expect a call from mine." She left. She didn't say goodbye. She walked out the door with the manila envelope under her arm, and I listened to her heels on the linoleum until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I called my son. His name is Dennis, and he's 34, and he lives 40 minutes away in a suburb where he's raising 2 kids and working as an accountant. He answered on the second ring, which meant he'd been waiting. I told him things had been difficult between Donna and me. I hadn't told him everything because I didn't know everything yet, but I told him enough that he'd been checking his phone. She came, I said. Papers? Papers. He was quiet for a moment. Then, did you sign? No. Good. He exhaled. Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been talking to Uncle Pete, your brother, and he told me something about 3 months ago that I didn't know how to bring to you. Not with everything going on. Pete is my younger brother. He's retired, lives in Flagstaff, calls me every Sunday. 3 months ago, the calls had gotten shorter. I'd noticed but assumed he was busy. Tell me, I said. He ran into Donna at a restaurant in Scottsdale. She was with a man. Pete said, he said it didn't look like a business lunch, Dad. I stared at the ceiling. The ceiling in that room was the exact pale beige of nothing in particular. I'd spent 12 days looking at it. Okay, I said, are you okay? I don't know yet, but I will be. Get me Frank's number. Frank is my attorney. We'd worked together on a contract dispute 6 years ago, and I liked him then. Steady. Practical, not the kind of man who performs for an audience. I called him that afternoon, still in a hospital bed, and I told him everything I'd told Donna and a good deal more. He listened without interrupting. That's a skill most people don't have. When I finished, he said, the insurance beneficiary change is going to be the centerpiece. If they processed it without your verified authorization, we're looking at potential fraud. That's not civil, Harold. That's criminal territory. I'm not trying to put her in jail, I understand, but having that card changes the negotiation. He paused. Can you get me the confirmation letter? Dennis has it. I sent him a photo when I got it. I didn't know why I was doing it at the time. Instinct, I guess. Good instinct, I guess. Good instinct. Another pause. I'm going to need you to sit tight for about 10 days. Can you do that? I'm in a recovery wing, I said. Sitting tight is my only option. Those 10 days were strange. Donna didn't come back. Dennis came every other day, brought me real food from a Greek place I liked, sat with me for hours talking about things that didn't matter and some things that did. My brother Pete flew in from Flagstaff and sat in the chair by the window and looked guilty, which I understood. He'd carried that information for 3 months, trying to figure out whether telling me would help or hurt. You did right, I told him. I should have told you sooner. Maybe, but you're here now. The physical therapist came twice a day, a young woman named, well, she told me to call her Kay, who had absolutely no patience for self-pity and made me work in a way that hurt and also helped. By the end of the second week, I could walk the length of the hallway and back, slowly, with a cane. But I could do it. Frank called me on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting up in bed, the window showing a flat February sky. Here's where we are, he said. Her attorney reached out this morning. They want to settle. What kind of settlement? That's the interesting part. They're proposing a clean split, marital assets divided equally, each party retaining their own separate assets going forward. No claim on your workers' comp settlement, no claim on the personal injury recovery. I sat with that for a moment. She's walking away from the settlement? Entirely, no claim. The workers' comp and the personal injury suit together. My attorney on the civil side had told me we were looking at somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000, depending on how the contractor's insurance played it. Donna walking away from that meant walking away from potentially $200,000 or more she might otherwise have claimed as a marital asset. The insurance fraud issue, I said. Exactly, Frank said. Her attorney knows we know, and the man Pete saw her with. His name came up in my background inquiry. He's a financial consultant. They've apparently been involved for about 8 months. 8 months. The Sunday calls from Pete getting shorter. The visits to the hospital. The manila envelope. She's been planning this for a while, I said. It looks that way. But here's the thing, Harold. She may have planned it, but she planned it wrong. She needed you to sign those divorce papers quickly, before you talked to anyone. before you had time to think, when you didn't, and when she found out you'd already spoken to Frank, and when Frank's office started pulling records, she lost her leverage? I thought about her standing at the foot of my hospital bed with the envelope. Don't make this ugly. She'd thought I was a man lying broken in a bed who just needed to be told what to do. She hadn't counted on 12 days of ceiling staring to think. Accept the settlement, I said. You sure? We could push for more. The insurance issue gives us, I know what it gives us. Accept it. I want this done, and I want to move forward. He accepted it. The paperwork took another 3 weeks, which I spent partly in the recovery wing and partly at Dennis's house, sleeping in the guest room, helping my grandkids with their homework in the evenings, eating dinners that actually tasted like something. The final papers came on a Tuesday. I signed them at Frank's office. Not a hospital tray table, not a hurried moment of someone else's convenience, a real table with real chairs, with my son sitting beside me and my attorney across from me, and everything done correctly and on my own terms. My signature, not the one she'd wanted. I've told this story a few times now, to my brother, to Dennis, once to an old colleague who went through his own divorce about a decade ago and called to check on me. Every time I tell it, someone asks the same question. They ask, didn't it hurt? Of course it hurt. 22 years is 22 years. I have memories with that woman, good ones, real ones. Dinners and vacations and a kitchen we redesigned together, and an argument once about a dog that went on for 3 weeks before we finally got the dog. The dog passed years before any of this happened. I still think about him sometimes. But the hurt and the betrayal aren't the same thing, and I think sometimes people confuse them. Marriages end. People grow apart, or want different things, or fall into something new before they've properly left the old. That happens. I'm not naive enough to think it doesn't. What she did, changing that beneficiary, timing the papers to arrive while I was medicated and immobile and at the lowest point a man can be, that wasn't the end of a marriage. That was the deliberate use of my weakness as a weapon, and there's a difference. The physical therapist, Kay, said something to me once during the session when I'd pushed too hard and my knee had given me trouble. She said, you have to learn to trust the leg again. You have to prove to yourself it'll hold. I think that's the work now, not bitterness. I genuinely don't have much of that, and what I do have, I'm working on. The work is proving to myself that the leg holds, that I can still stand on my own, that 63 isn't finished. I'm living in a small house now, rented in a neighborhood where I can walk to a coffee shop in the mornings. I go slowly. I still have the cane some days. The coffee is good, and the woman at the counter knows my order and asks about my knee, and some mornings that's enough. Dennis calls every day. Pete calls every Sunday, longer calls now, the way they used to be. My granddaughter drew me a picture last week and told me it was a portrait of me and labeled it with my name in 7-year-old handwriting, which I have on the refrigerator. The settlement came through. The personal injury case is still pending. Could be another year before it resolves. But the divorce is done, and the house is quiet in the way that's uncomfortable at first, and then, slowly, becomes something else. I'm learning to call it peace. What I want to say, if you're listening and any part of this sounds familiar, if you've had someone hand you an envelope at the worst possible moment of your life and stand there waiting for you to collapse, is this. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to pick up the phone and call someone you trust. You are allowed to take the time you need. You are allowed to not sign, not agree, not perform the version of yourself that someone else has decided is convenient. The leg holds. I promise you, the leg holds. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any mystical sense. I'm not a mystical man. But in the plain practical sense that what you do has weight, it lands somewhere, and eventually the landing comes back to you. Donna spent months building something she thought was clever. She changed a beneficiary. She timed the papers. She waited until I was flat on my back in a hospital bed, medicated and alone, and she walked in with an envelope and the assumption that a broken man would just sign whatever was put in front of him. That was her plan. It wasn't a cruel plan in the theatrical sense. There was no dramatic villain speech. It was just quiet and cold and calculated. And she believed it would work because she decided I was already finished. That's where she miscalculated. Not on the legal strategy. On me. I'd had 12 days in that bed to think. 12 days with nothing but ceiling tiles and the sound of the hallway and my own thoughts. And somewhere in those 12 days, something in me got very still and very clear. Not angry. Not panicked. Clear. I started remembering things, the shorter phone calls from Pete, the distance, the twice in 11 days visits. I started connecting what I knew to what I suspected. And by the time she walked through that door, I wasn't a broken man waiting to be told what to do. I was a man who had already decided. That's what I mean about cause and effect. She created the conditions for my clarity. The accident took everything away from me. Mobility, certainty, the comfortable noise of an ordinary life, and what was left, stripped down to the studs, was just me, who I actually was, what I actually knew. And it turned out that was enough. I think about Dennis driving 40 minutes to sit with me every other day. I think about Pete flying in from Flagstaff and sitting in that chair by the window looking guilty, carrying something he didn't know how to put down. Those men didn't owe me anything beyond what they already gave me every ordinary day. And yet there they were. That's not nothing. That's not a small thing. When you find out who shows up when you're broken, you find out what you actually have. And what I had was more than I'd been paying attention to. Frank used to say that the law doesn't care about fairness. It cares about facts. But in this case, the facts were on the side of fairness, and that doesn't always happen. The beneficiary change. The timing. The 8 months. She'd been careful, but not careful enough, because she'd underestimated the one variable she should have studied most, the man she was trying to outmaneuver. Intelligence isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about knowing what you don't know and finding people who know it. I knew I needed Frank. I knew I needed time. I knew that a signature in a hospital bed was worth nothing good to me, and potentially everything bad. That's not brilliance. That's just the kind of thinking that becomes available to you when you stop panicking and start paying attention. And the integrity piece? That's harder to talk about because it sounds like I'm praising myself, and I'm not trying to do that. I'm 63 years old. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life and in that marriage. But I didn't take a sledgehammer to what remained. I didn't take a sledgehammer to what remained. I didn't try to destroy her. I told Frank I want this done and I want to move forward. Not because I'm noble, but because I knew that whatever I built next, I needed to build it clean. The leg holds. That's what Kay told me. Prove to yourself it'll hold. It holds.